like this, and they look like they're staring at the camera the whole time. It's getting pretty complicated for a setup for just me running a podcast at home. But oh, you can see in the back that brown wooden box. That's my old speakers. They died, and I got new speakers, and they have a little dial. They're edifiers, so I've been edificated. Not a word. This year is lower than this year. All right. Deep sigh. The Olympics, coronavirus. I almost want the Olympics to happen and get done so they'll be over. I mean, there's going to be, during the Olympics, a lot of speculation. What's happening? What's going on? Is everyone going to die? And then after it's over, any coronavirus would be like, was this because of the Olympics? Like, I know how news cycles go, and the Olympics is it. Until it happens, the Olympics is it. And they're connected, intertwined, like the two snakes that make up the doctor's symbol, which is a weird one if you think about it. Two snakes having sex. I don't know. They're wrapped up with each other. I never went. I should just don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to do Olympics as I always do. Even when I say I'm not going to do it, I end up start to talk about something, and then I go into the story, next story, next story, next story. So you can take a deep sigh. We should do some ASMR, some deep breathing first. Really want to get on this ASMR money. I think maybe that wave, that trend is kind of died out. I'm not seeing his food while you listen to it. Is that relaxing? This is really the problem. Is I don't know what. It's the same with fetishes. Like, you'll have your thing that you like, and you won't understand what someone else likes, their fetish. And it goes back and forth. They don't understand yours either. So I guess that's it. I just, the ASMR, I was not part of that generation. It doesn't make sense to me. The whole sensory stimulus thing doesn't work for me. I was, when I was in university, my girlfriend and I went to isolation tanks. So the water is supposed to be body temperature, and it's full of salt so that you float, and then it's enclosed completely so there's no sound. That I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed doing that. I know Joe Rogan talked about having one of those like in his studio or in his house or something. If I was rich, that is one of the things I would consider buying, an isolation chamber. They're not necessary. I don't need one. I can just sit. So if I'm just sitting, I don't need an isolation chamber. But it's an interesting thing. It's conceptually, if I had enough money. That is something I would get for sure. Probably. You know those tiny swimming pools where it pushes? I think I'm trying to avoid starting, because I don't really want to talk about the Olympics. The thing I would buy if I was rich is those tiny swimming pools where the water rushes at you, so you swim. It's like a treadmill, but of water. I've always hated running. I don't know if I like swimming, but I would, if I had a choice, I would swim. Or a stationary bike or something like that. I don't know. Running has always bothered. Just thinking about sports and the Olympics. So let's talk about the Olympics, because I don't want to go back to like just dirty news. But all those stories get buried so far, they're actually harder to find now. I know they're still happening, but they just get overwhelmed by the amount of Olympic news and things like that are going on. Sad. Okay. I'm going to talk about Suga a little bit, the Prime Minister. Or should we talk about the Olympics? Let's talk about Suga first, because I just said it. So when Suga was made Prime Minister, I actually don't remember how long ago it was now. I've always kind of liked Suga. I like him way better than Abe, I'll tell you that. I am not as deep into politics as you might think, because like I'm doing this show and I clearly read the news and stuff, but I don't get deep into like the if it's not in the news, I don't like go out and find it. So approval rating when he became Prime Minister was 62%. And now, because of primarily the Olympics, so a lot of it has to do with coronavirus. You could say that's partially not his fault, but the way it's handled is his responsibility. But a big chunk of the drop in his approval rating actually has to do with the Olympics. It's actually gone down to 35%. So now it looks like if they have an election after the Olympics is finished, which is what they're talking about right now, is a snap election after the Olympics are done, he'll probably lose. Or there might be a vote of no confidence, which is what happened in Star Wars. The only reason people know about what a vote of no confidence is because of Star Wars. So if the prequels did nothing, they did teach people that a vote of no confidence is an actual thing that can happen. His approval rating has dropped. And when they talk to people about it, the thing they talk about the most is the Olympics. Now, here's the thing. It actually came up, I don't remember what week. It was a few weeks ago, maybe. The government is not actually in charge of the Olympics. Suga is not in charge of the Olympics. I remember specifically saying that like Suga kind of wasn't making very specific comments about the Olympics. He was saying, oh, I hope they're done safely. I don't want to give any sort of policy recommendations because it's not my job. It's not my business. This is essentially a private thing that the government is not involved with. I'm sure they support it, but it's really private industries and businesses in the city of Tokyo. So the person responsible, so Suga's approval rating has dropped by, half, so 62 to 35. But it's actually not his deal. It's the governor of Tokyo's deal. Her name is Koike. And she's not taking any heat at all because people aren't associating. She makes statements. She makes comments. She says she wants the Olympics to go forward. But a lot of politicians are, and a lot of politicians are saying the opposite. So that's just what politicians do. But they're not responsible, whereas she actually is. She is the one who could say, the city of Tokyo has made a contract with the Olympic Committee. We're going to cancel that contract. We're going to stop the Olympics right now. Contracts and stuff, I mean, they're making it sound like it's the International Olympic Committee that decides. I've actually talked on this a couple of times. They've said like it's the International Olympic Committee that would decide whether or not to cancel the Olympics, and they've decided to go ahead. And it almost makes it sound like the city of Tokyo can't do anything about it, but lock the doors because it's the city of Tokyo's facilities. They actually decide. But I'm assuming breaking contracts means paying money even if nothing happens. So they want to make the money so they can fulfill their end of the contract. Right now, it's the amount of people who've gotten the vaccine in Japan standing around 12%. They're talking about like how can we have spectators and people go to the Olympics. One of the first suggestions was we track the GPS on their phone. And this ran into immediate problems because of violation of privacy. Now it's also ineffective because, okay, I am a person, I'm going to attend the Olympics, I have my cell phone, and they say, okay, let's track Peter's phone, and then I go to the Olympics. I've actually put my phone down, I leave it in my room. My GPS says I'm in my room, but I'm not. I'm out spreading coronavirus because I'm one of the people who had it. Because I'm irresponsible enough to not follow the rules about the GPS tracking. I'm clearly irresponsible enough to not follow the rules about coronavirus safety. So what I realized is just reading a couple stories that were laying blame and doing all these kind of things. Because the tracking, the phones and stuff, is a political issue. And is it acceptable to track citizens' phones, to track their location all the time? Japan, I've said it many, many times, is very privacy concerned. It's very privacy is very important to the average Japanese person. That probably will not work out. Suga, though, he's damned if you do, damned if you don't. I mean, that's just the way it is. If the Olympics is successful, he probably will not get credit. If the Olympics fails completely, he's going to get blamed even though it wasn't his deal. I feel some sympathy for him, but he should have taken a stronger stance and made it more clear from the beginning that it's not his thing. The Olympics is not his thing. That is the message he never got out. He has said it directly. He has said, I, as the Prime Minister of Japan, I'm not in charge of the Olympics. He didn't turn around and say, it's that lady over there, the governor of Tokyo, you should be talking to and blaming, or it should be the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. He didn't say that. And again, I actually have some respect for that. He's like, I'm not going to blame someone else. I get why you think I'm in charge because I'm the Prime Minister. But he did make very clear statements that, I'm not deciding policy for the Olympics or how the Olympics are run. I'm deciding policy for the country. And those things are actually separate. But he's going to get blamed anyways. That's just it. Vaccine passports is a very big deal. And a lot of countries, European countries primarily, are saying we're going to have European passports. People are going to need these if they're going to travel. It's going to be awesome because we're going to, be able to see who's sick and who's not sick and let them into the country. We're going to control the coronavirus. Japan's thinking about doing the same thing. Now, what they're initially talking about doing is you get a certificate. So you get your vaccine. I assume both doses. Most of them you need 2 doses. You get the vaccine, and then you get a certificate, a physical document. And I was wondering if that was going to start like counterfeit stuff. Like they're going to have counterfeit documents you could buy on the black market so you could travel without getting the vaccine. Because there are a lot of people in Japan who are not anti-vaccine, but they don't want the vaccine until it's been tested on everybody else. But you can see the problem. If everybody is waiting for everyone else to take the vaccine, then no one actually ends up getting the vaccine. They don't like new drugs in Japan. They want everything to have been tested thoroughly. The problem is to test something thoroughly, you need people to test it on. I would absolutely go in first. You want to do the vaccine? I'm there. I'm ready to go. Then it would probably be a smartphone app. They're moving a lot of stuff towards just smartphone apps, which again sets up a whole other set of security questions that are very interesting. Because if my certificate that I have had the vaccine that I'm required to have to be able to travel is on my phone, and my phone gets stolen or I lose my phone, what happens then? Like I guess I already have all my money stuff on my phone. Like my credit card's connected. I shouldn't tell you this because you can steal my phone and get my credit card. My credit card has a very low limit. So you know what? I dare you. That was a mistake. I should not have said I dare you to steal my phone. Yeah, I do worry. Like if this becomes a vital document, I don't know. I'm torn. Is it better to have a card or is it better to have an app on the phone? 2-factor authentication, have both. You have to have both. You have to have the card and the phone and unlock the phone with your fingerprint. So that's almost triple factor authentication. Yeah, now I'm getting more comfortable with it. I now have gotten past like passwords are unacceptable. You have to have 2-factor authentication on everything, but it makes it such a pain in the ass to change computers. And I work on like sometimes 3-4 computers a day, depending on where I'm working. I hate logging into stuff. I really liked the idea of the dongle that you put into the computer, but actually my computers at work don't accept USBs because of security reasons. So I wouldn't be able to like get into my Gmail at work if I use that as a security system. So there's still a lot of problems there, but yeah, fingerprint, card, phone app. I'm on board with that. I'm okay with that. People who don't want it, who don't want this system, they probably don't want to get the vaccine. That's actually my thinking, and they shouldn't be allowed to travel anyways. I am doing the stuff that these anti-vaxxers and whatnot, they want to like get around it because of privacy concerns. I'm just like, no, shut it all down. But if we'd shut it all down, we'd be done by now. I hate saying I'm right, but I'm super right. Talking about being right, I think it was last week. Yeah, I talked about the relationship between Taiwan and Japan sending vaccines to Taiwan, because we're nice guys, we're friendly, not just to piss off China, which I actually think that was always kind of in there. It's like, oh, if we send vaccines to Taiwan, we're just gonna nudge China a little bit. They can't really hate us because we're doing something nice. We're doing something nice that they didn't do. So it's one of those things where you look good doing something that someone else should have or could have done. But I said one of the biggest problems right now. I did a story at work talking about chips, so semiconductors and computer chips and stuff. In the average car now, there are between 50 and 150 chips on average. So that's just not even like a high-tech car. So I guess like a Tesla's probably like 200, 300, 400. I don't know. Massive amounts of chips just in a single car. So Japan being a very oriented country, they produce a lot of cars. There's Nissan, Toyota, Honda, Subaru. Many companies, they produce a lot of cars. They need a lot of chips. And then the story was that came out right after they had finished sending all the vaccines to Taiwan. They said, we're going to work with some overseas partners to create factories in Japan to produce our own chips. Now, they didn't say Taiwan specifically that time, so that was last week. The next day after, so it would have been, I record this on Tuesday, put it out Tuesday night in Japan. Wednesday, they came out and admitted it was Taiwan. They weren't talking about overseas partners. They were like, oh, there's the single largest chip maker in the world is from Taiwan. There's actually more than one, but the biggest one's there, and the other ones are also pretty big. We've just given all their folk vaccines. Yippee-ki-yay, guess what they're going to give us? Technology to build our own factories. They're not going to be independent of Taiwan or the need for their chips, but at least it will mean there's more sources for chips in the future. So specifically what I said on Wednesday, and I wrote this down, we need to cooperate with overseas counterparts. The world's top chip maker is TSMC, so Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. We have to work with them. So it's not even like vague anymore. The thing I was guessing it's not like they're being self-serving in that they just want chips, but they're like, there is a benefit to being nice to other countries that have stuff that we don't have. They'll give us some of that stuff, or at least help us do that ourselves. This is really smart. This is how I've said many times. I've talked about politics and tribalism and all this stuff. And the biggest mistake that governments and political parties make is they get really hard ass on the other party, but there's a zero conversion rate when you do that. Oppression doesn't convert anyone to your side, and it's a game where your side eventually will start to dwindle. Your numbers will always go down if you aren't gaining members, and the only way to gain members, like you'll have so many born into the system that you've created. That's fine. That is not growth. That is probably just going to maintain it. You need conversion rates to be successful, and the way you be successful is to actually treat those people you want to join you well. So Japan has treated Taiwan well. Taiwan has treated Japan well. Now we're in a situation, Japan has gone out of its way. We're going to give you X amount of vaccines. Taiwan has turned around and said, hey, you guys need some chips? We got you. Now Japan's going to have its own chips. There was talk of trying to partner with Korea. The statement is a very Japanese way of putting it. It's an extremely difficult country. That's not saying anything about Korean people. That's just the long storied history between Japan and Korea is really dark and negative. It's the same problem with China. It's not even what's happening now. It's historically China, Japan, Korea, Japan. They don't like each other because of all the terrible things that have happened. A lot of it's Japan's fault. I mean, I am never really of the opinion that history should be held up for modern people. Only because I honestly believe if the situation was reversed, probably those other people would have been really horrible the exact same way. That's really the only justification. I think that every country does horrible things, and all we can do is try to push forward and do positive things. But that actually means you got to let go of the past. That's really hard to do. I understand that. But like in this situation, I think I've said in the past, really early days in Ninja News Japan, I actually said if Japan's technology was partnered with Korea's manufacturing power, that would be the powerhouse in the world. Same with China, but there's irreconcilable differences, it seems. So that's probably never going to happen. But Taiwan seems to be the first step, and I'm really happy about that because I really like the idea of countries partnering up, being nice to each other, making things good for each other, getting stuff right. So now it's kind of specifically the Olympics. Of course, that still now is intertwined with coronavirus so deeply that you're not going to get away from it. The Olympics has sold tickets for 42% capacity, which I was actually kind of impressed by. They could have 225,000 spectators a day if everyone comes. So that's just based on ticket sales. That doesn't mean all those people who have tickets are going to come. And maybe those tickets were given away to companies and stuff, and they're giving them away to employees. 70% of those tickets were sold to locals, which is kind of good. It means that people aren't traveling to the Olympics. So like I said, I live in Japan. I could take time off work and go to the Olympics. I probably wouldn't do that. I don't see that as being a valuable enough thing. But if I had coronavirus and I went there, I would make the people there sick. If I went there and got coronavirus, I would be bringing it back to my city. That's also bad. So actually, people shouldn't be traveling. So if they sell them all to locals, that's actually not as bad as I would think, as I was expecting, is actually what I meant. The thing I'm interested in, they've sold 42% capacity. So when they're doing baseball and soccer games in Japan, I think they're stopping at 50. They haven't set a hard upper limit on how many tickets they'll sell. Now, remember, the Olympics is expensive. And for all the contract fulfillment and stuff, they need to make money. Really, right now, what they're hoping for is a successful Olympics, which means they do the Olympics, the events get held, and not many people die from coronavirus. That would be a successful Olympics. A fantastic Olympics would be they break even. An impossibly good Olympics would be they make a profit. But without foreign visitors, probably that's an impossibility. If they've hit 42% now, I assume they're still selling tickets. If they're still selling tickets, where are they going to stop? Because I think they got to stop pretty soon. And then again, they could actually call it. If they were smart, they would go, we've sold 50% of the tickets. We're not selling anymore because that was our plan. I think the problem is greed's going to get the better of them. They're going to sell too many tickets. One single person with coronavirus is going to go into that crowd, make everyone sick. And then you have the Olympics coronavirus outbreak, which is exactly the thing they don't want to do. Greed and success often do not go together. That's something, maybe that's your lesson for today. This was one of my favorite stories. I actually just read this morning. Kaori Yamaguchi is an Olympic gold medalist in judo. She also is part of the Japanese Olympic Committee. She came straight out and said the Olympics shouldn't have spectators for public safety. So the 42% of tickets sold that I just mentioned, she's saying we shouldn't have sold any of that. I do judo, and I kind of maybe have a soft spot for judo people, but one of the things I've noticed, a lot of sort of judo folk, they're kind of straightforward with their opinions. And she's not holding back. I think it comes down to once you've gotten onto the mats and fought someone who literally wants to hurt you. Of course, they want to win the fight. They want to beat you. But literally wants to do you physical damage. Fear becomes a different thing. So like I'll walk into a room knowing that none of these people are going to hurt me physically. You want to know where confidence comes from? It comes from the fact that I know that none of you are going to get out of your chair and do anything. And even if you did, I'd whoop your ass because none of you were trained. How about that? So I think that for me in my life has delivered me a great deal of confidence. Madam Yamaguchi, she's basically saying this whole committee that I work with, they're all wrong. And I'm going to take a stand, and I don't really give a shit who thinks otherwise. And that is one of those attitudes I appreciate. She's saying the problem is it creates a double standard. The government says stay home, but it's also saying come to the Olympics. The government's actually said they're going to go into a semi-state of emergency during the Olympics, which doesn't mean anything. So the states of emergency already it's become clear in Japan, they don't mean anything. People in Japan are not paying attention. Like the bars and stuff, they are shutting down when they're supposed to shut down. People are still going out. They're still drinking. They've actually, when you say this city's in a state of emergency, people are like, is it like the third, fourth time? Who cares? And so it doesn't matter to them is the actual issue. So now that doesn't mean anything. But now if you make a softer state of emergency, a semi-state of emergency, well, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. And that's the second problem, is if this doesn't mean anything, well then who cares? So they're not going to take it seriously. Then Yamaguchi goes on to crap on the prime minister, who I said earlier, the very first story was that he's not actually 100% responsible for the Olympics, but he is responsible for the lockdowns and whatnot. So this is what she's talking about. She said the mistake the prime minister is making, he's not explaining how things are safe. So he says, like, let's go out and do it. It's safe. Let's do this stuff. But he doesn't explain things clearly, which I actually agree with. He's not explicit in what things. And then she came out with this. I actually wrote this down. I quite like this quote. The most dangerous moment is when you think you've won. Typically, that's when you get beaten up. So there you go. That's from someone who's fought all their life. They probably know what they're talking about when it comes to getting beat up every now and then. And yeah, it usually comes from a moment of overconfidence because you think, oh, I've won this. And then boom, something you weren't expecting happens. Last bit of coronavirus news. Blah, 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 blah. Shinjuku, it's a very famous area in Tokyo. They, when they get to the vaccines, because right now they're still doing people over 65. Then the shift is to under 65, and you sort of expect, because they're going old to young, they just keep that in order. They actually have decided the next group is going to be 20 to 30s, which I actually think is a really good idea. And the reason I think it's a really good idea, it's because the people who are 20 to 30s are the ones who are not being responsible, and they're actually going out and having parties and stuff. They were going out and drinking, and in Shinjuku specifically, they're the ones who are going out and spreading it, because they're going out and having drinks, and they're going out to hostess clubs. Like a lot of the stories we did were people going out to hostess clubs and catching the disease or spreading the disease. And then everyone else who went in there, they also spread the disease and got the disease. And it was all spreading in this 20 to 30, maybe even 40 age range, because they're the ones who are going out and having a good time. And they don't want to be shackled by the government, man. So focusing on them, the spreaders, is dealing with the source of the issue and not the symptom or the risk. Because the older people, once you've gotten over 65s, you've gotten most of the people who are sort of at highest risk. And then you want to get the people who might be spreading it, and that's actually the 20 to 30-year-olds. So I really agree with this. The government said it's because they don't have access to a family doctor. And so they might not just have the medical resources available to them because they're young and they just haven't had to deal with that stuff in their life. So they want to make it available, and they want to prioritize them in the max vaccination sites. It's actually a good idea. A long time ago, I have only recently, like the last 2-3 months, started keeping track of what I say in the podcast, topic-wise. So now, from the future, if I refer back to an episode, I can actually refer back to the specific episode if you want to hear what I say. But before that, I didn't. There was a British guy with a Japanese last name, but a British guy who was taking his bento box garbage. And so he was having lunch, have a drink in the bento box, and taking that and throwing it into mailboxes. And it happened multiple times. 150 pieces of mail were soiled by like grease and oil and stuff from the waste of the bento box. And he was arrested. So they basically staked out a mailbox that this was happening to fairly regularly. Pretty easy to catch the guy if you think about it. They staked out the mailbox. They saw him do it. They caught him. And he just pled ignorance. He's like, I thought it was a garbage can, which I was frustrated by because I know foreign people in Japan, and they just plead ignorance on everything. They purposely do stuff. They act like complete assholes. And then if they get caught, they just go, oh, I know. That's my impression. I should do a whole show of my impressions because they're amazing. But my impression of foreigner, there you go. There's a little taste of Peter's new one-man show, What a Foreigner is Like to Me in Japan. He basically just said he thought it was a garbage can, and he was not prosecuted, which means he's not really going to be punished. I guess getting arrested is punishment, because you're thinking about the level of crime. Throwing your garbage into a mailbox is not the worst crime in the world, but it's because I know deep down inside he knew what he was doing. He was just being a dick. So I'm assuming that means nothing happens. He's not going to get fined. He's not going to get deported or anything. I would love to see him get deported. Like he gets sent back to England, and then they're like, well, why'd you come back? He's like, well, I threw garbage in a mailbox. He knew. As not a judge, I absolutely guarantee he knew exactly what he was doing. He was just doing it on purpose to be an asshole. A woman used a toy knife to rob a bank. So in Japan, there's no guns. There's guns, but it's almost impossible to get. So there might as well be no guns. So there's no guns in Japan. Let's just say they just started they just made a law to get a crossbow. So there's the sword and firearms laws, and they're very strict. But there was no laws on crossbows until very recently. Last year, there were pre-corona, so actually 2 years ago, there were actually a bunch of murders with crossbows, or attempted murders. Apparently, they're harder to shoot than I thought. I've never shot a crossbow, so there's something you've learned about me. So most crimes are committed with knives, primarily kitchen knives. So you're not going to get stabby, cool military knives, because one of the things is it's actually illegal to walk around with a knife. So if I have a Swiss Army knife, I actually have one on my desk somewhere. If I cannot give the police a reason for me having it, then it's actually illegal for me to carry it, and I can get arrested. So if you buy a knife, you basically can take that knife home. If you have a knife and you're going, let's say, fishing, and you have a fish gutting knife, you have to be able to say like, oh, I'm going fishing right now. That's why I have a knife with me. If you can't give a good reason, they can arrest you on the spot, which makes it difficult to carry around a knife. But if you're going to go rob a bank, I guess you should have gotten past that. I assume she had kitchen knives, but maybe she was actually worried about hurting someone. So she went into the bank. She held a knife towards a staff member and said, like, give me the money. A male employee nearby noticed the knife wasn't real and subdued her. I don't know what that means. I assume he just like tackled her, or maybe because I don't know what physical state this woman was in, he may have just like grabbed her hand and taken the knife out and held her still until the police arrived. Subdued is vague. I would like details. I would like to know if there was like a big kerfuffle or if he just like smacked her upside the head and said, stop it. Both are funny, if I'm being honest. I would love to see a bank robber foiled by just like up the side of the head. And then the guy just going, stop it. And then when he goes to run for the door, he just grabs his wrist and go, no. It's like how you would deal with kids. So there's a few questions I would like. I'm never going to get the answers. This is one of those ones where I'm never going to get the answers to it. Why did you choose a toy knife? Maybe actually the prosecution would be lower because it's clear you never intended to kill. And intent can go into a lot of crimes in Japan. A lot of Yakuza, when they get arrested, they say, I did not intend to kill, even if they did. That's very important because it actually would lower the level of the crime they've committed. On to the last story of Ninja News Japan for today. This is always the last story. I kind of save it for the end. I know it's the one that it's the one that pays off the most. It's the one people want the most. Creepy dudes doing creepy thing. A man stole recorders from a Nagoya middle school. So last year, 2018, so actually quite a long time ago, between December 3rd and December 6th, multiple recorders were stolen from a school. Now, I immediately was like, because what are you doing with the recorders? I have explained the long distance kiss before on Ninja News Japan, but there's a thing in Japan, and it's if you drink out of so I drink out of a cup, and then I pass it to a lady friend, and she drinks out of the same cup. Our salivas have mixed, and then maybe I take the cup back and I drink, and I get her saliva in my mouth. That's called a long distance kiss. So it's a very intimate idea. To drink out of the same cup, or for your mouth to touch the same thing someone else's mouth has touched. So I think when I was back in Canada, if I took a drink and I gave it to my friend and said, like, do you want a drink? And they took a drink out of it, we wouldn't really think anything of it. There was no sexual undertone there, whereas in Japan, culturally, there is. So that's actually really interesting. I didn't know that until I came to Japan. And then I actually offered a student a drink, and everyone went, ooh, like I'd done something. And I was like, whoa, what did I do? It's quite shocking when you break a cultural norm you don't know anything about because you have no clue what's happening. Because I remember I was drinking in Japan, there's new Pepsis come out like every year. This year, it's actually in like 2 weeks, Nama Pepsi is coming out, which Nama just means fresh. So I either assume that's going to be a fresh flavor or it's going to, I don't know. I'm going to buy it when it comes out. I'll do a little Twitch stream of me drinking Pepsi, which I'm sure will bring in millions of viewers. But I've totally lost track. Yes. So the recorder, if I use a recorder and then I give it to someone else to use, I'm having a long distance kiss with them. So as soon as a creepy guy steals something that went into the mouth of a student, and you know it's girls. Ew. So now that I know that cultural point, get really grossed out by it. 26 girls have had their recorders stolen. So there were 26 reported thefts. And again, very specifically 26 girls. So he wasn't stealing the boys' recorders. He was only stealing the girls' recorders. So he kind of knew whose recorder was whose, which is another level of creepy to it. A girl posted on her personal blog, my recorder got stolen, and a man made a comment. They didn't say what the comment was. They didn't, like, was it him gloating? Was this like a Joker thing or the Riddler? He was like, aha. And I should have written a riddle before I went that. This is the problem with not scripting fully, is you do get a more natural speech pattern, but when I have an idea mid sort of recording, I can't stop write a poem and then make it sound like I just made that up on the spot. Anyways, he posted a comment on her blog. Again, a whole other level of creepy because he knows where her social media is. He knows who she is. He's commenting, he's watching. And he's like, my first image was him sitting with a recorder in his mouth as he typed. I don't know any recorder songs. What do? You do hot cross buns. I think that's the first one. Because I went to one of my kids' concerts when they're really small. It was so painful. Kids' concerts are awful. There's your ASMR for today. Someone can record that and loop it just over and over again. So he was caught and arrested. And I thought, oh, he's doing the grossest things humanly possible with these recorders. 16 recorders were found at his home. So where were the other 10? The other 10 were sold on the internet, which actually shows that he's maybe not as creepy. I'm sure he is. So yeah, let's just delete that. I rescind my previous statement. He is creepy. He's just selling it to other creepy men. But that immediately, my first thought was, why does he need to go through the trouble of stealing a recorder? He could just buy one. Lick it. Oh, the ASMR is going off the charts in this episode. Lick the recorder, pack it up and send it and say it was a girl's spit. You make your money and you don't go to jail. I mean, someone could try to get you arrested for fraud because a girl didn't actually lick it. I really want to see what that sounds like after this is recorded. That's the other sound I make that seems to really gross people out. It's slapping my tongue against the back of my teeth. I can do that forever. Yeah, so this is also like the underwear thing. Like you say it's been worn by a hot girl. You sell the underwear online. You sell the recorder online. You say it was wrapped in the mouth of a lavacious 15-year-old. But it wasn't. It was me because just get Dave to lick it. Because then I could say I'm a hot person. I guess person would technically be fraud there. I'm sure I could figure out. The hottest creature on the planet has licked this. Yeah, just get Dave. I put some peanut butter on the end, have Dave lick the end of all the recorders, and that's it. I've made millions. I sometimes think I should be a criminal.
You can tweet questions or comments at Ninja News Japan or join the Facebook group. On Facebook, search for Ninja News Japan. Sexy out homies.
Whatever. For the people who are here and watching, get a little bonus of Dave. Dave is... I want to get it out of the way. How do I... Oh, there you go. Yeah. Oh, there you go. It's Dave. Dave is wrecked. It's already hot. It's not even the hottest it's going to get. So I assume when we hit full summer, Dave is just going to be all tore up. He's going to spend all his time on the cool floor